are waiting for President Obama's remarks from a mosque in Maryland, scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern at the Islamic Society of Baltimore, the first he's visited since becoming president. And this trip is part of the administration's push to recognize the contributions of Muslims to America and to counter an argument linking the Muslim faith to terrorism. Here's White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest.
I think it is certainly true that we've seen an alarming willingness on the part of some Republicans to try to marginalize law-abiding, patriotic Muslim Americans. And it is offensive. We have seen a willingness on the part of leading Republican presidential candidates to try to appeal to people's fears and anxieties. And they capitalized on terrorist attacks to do exactly that.
But critics say they're concerned by reports about that mosque, the one that the president chose to visit. Reports the former imam there has links to the radical Muslim Brotherhood and to the Northern Virginia mosque where the Anwar al-Awlaki preached. Now remember, he was so evil, our U.S. federal government droned him. They took him out.
The question is, why is he going to this particular mosque? I mean, we know that the president wants to tackle Islamophobia, and we wish and we hope that he would elevate fighting ISIS and radical Islamic terror at the same level that he's fighting Islamophobia, but he doesn't. There's so many other mosques he could have chosen. And the Muslim Brotherhood, don't forget, they have deep ties to terrorism. Many of the members of Al-Qaeda are members of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's had the Muslim Brotherhood to the White House when they took over in Egypt after Hosni Mubarak fell. And the Egyptian people were not happy that we meddled in their election and that we put the Muslim Brotherhood in power. But you look at everything else, Harris, that the president's doing. Not just this, not just going to this radicalized mosque, but releasing prisoners from Gitmo, rules of engagement for our military to fight these jihadis. Everything that he is doing points to the question, whose side is he on? And people are wondering today why he picked that.
All right. So there's this simultaneous thing that Andrea is talking about, Judge, and I want to bring in something that happened on America's Newsroom today and get your reaction to it. Because the Muslim reform movement in this country and its advocates and leaders are looking at some of the things that Andrea just listed and saying, well, wait a minute, is that really where this president wants to go? And let us tell him why he shouldn't. Watch.
Domestically, he's cozying up those who actually may preach against violence, but they're preaching ideology that's on a conveyor belt towards radicalism, which is Islamist.
And he's talking about the specific mosque.
Well, and you know what? Zuhdi Jasser makes great sense. Look, we've got a president who makes deals with Iran. Okay, he thinks they're our friends. And, you know, before we give him a check, they've got 10 of our sailors on their knees with guns to their heads. We've got a president who, instead of protecting Americans, is more worried, along with his Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, with the anti-Muslim rhetoric, that's free speech, First Amendment, that may be insulting to Muslims. They ought to start taking the side of Americans who are victims of Muslim or Islamic jihad. And this is a run-up, not just to the presidential election and taking down Republicans, but it's also a run-up to the National Prayer Breakfast. If you recall last year, he basically said, hey, you Christians, it's your turn. You know, get off your high horse. This is a president who does not you know, my sense is who doesn't believe that Americans are worth protecting as opposed to the feelings of other individuals.
Wow, that's really strong. I want to flip this, though, because this isn't the first president to visit a mosque.
Yeah, it's important to point out that George W. Bush visited a mosque as well, and it was only 6 days following the 9/11 attacks. He faced similar heat. It was a Washington, D.C. mosque attempting to reach out to Muslim Americans at that time, saying these acts of violence against innocents violate the fundamental tenets of the Islamic faith. But doesn't that make it so clear that this isn't, the controversy isn't around Obama visiting the mosque, it's the mosque that he's visiting is the controversy.
And also, I mean, when was the last time that actually President Obama went to see and talk to Christians and talk to churches? I mean, this is a president who just made the biggest deal with the biggest terrorist country in the world. And Christians are being killed all over the world. I mean, his president has tried to take out the Bible from schools. In God we trust. Now, all these things are just slowly going away, and in the meantime he's going to a mosque, and there's all association with terrorists. You know, Bush, you brought him, I mean, it was a different time. Also, Bush used to pray every morning. He was a Christian, so you kind of knew that this guy actually went to church. With President Obama, he's never talked about Christians. I mean, there's an epidemic right now, I mean, worldwide, that Christians are being slaughtered. And this president never talked about it once. He's never talked about Jesus Christ once in his career. And that's a problem to me, because I have a president who I believe is not a true Christian.
Well, the White House would tell you that is not the case, and
Wow.
he did meet with the Pope, and I mean, there is the flip side and all of that. But one thing is for certain, his staff had to have looked at this mosque. They had to have known the reports,
Well, talking about
the
the
facts
Pope,
that are out there.
he met, I mean, the Pope just met with, I mean, the Pope just met in the Vatican City with the leaders of Iran. So, I mean, doesn't say much about the president meeting the Pope at all. The president should be going to churches in this country and talk to Christians, leaders, and just make a point that he's with them all the way.
Hasn't the UK declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization? That was something that has been in question for years. And the UK just came out and said Muslim Brotherhood is indeed a terrorist organization.
They are.
And yet our president is visiting a mosque with Muslim Brotherhood.
Again, I just question whether or not his staff would have looked at the list of things that are reported as facts and looked at the things that are out there and made
No, they don't,
a
because
different decision.
They didn't do it with Bergdahl, so why would they? And he doesn't read his intelligence briefing, so why bother research and facts, Harris?
So we'll be watching for that. The president will be going to this mosque in Maryland, and we will